We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people. Because today, we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
Well, welcome, friends and fellow citizens, to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this show. I'm also the president of the We the People Convention, and this show is brought to you courtesy of the donations that are given by citizens like yourself to the We the People Convention, which pays for this radio show and the podcast. If you're listening on the radio on Saturday mornings, welcome to all of you. We're on a 5-station network throughout Ohio from 7:30 a.m. until 9 a.m. on throughout Ohio on the radio. So if you join us on the radio network, welcome to you. If this is your first time, we're awful glad to have you with us. For those of you watching on the podcast, that is posted usually every Friday at about noon, and then is available all week long, 24/7 for you to watch on your phone, on your laptop, on your computer, on YouTube, on iTunes, and at our website at wethepeopleconvention.org. If you go to the website, you just click on the little yellow button right on the front page, and it'll take you to the podcast page, let you know what radio stations you can listen to the podcast on, how you can get on iTunes, how you can get it on YouTube, and all those kind of things. So thanks everyone for joining us. We're awful glad to have you, and it's time to get serious about what's going on because it's now past July 4th, and we are ready to start getting ready for the election. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in this show, but we're going to start with the thing that's driving us all crazy, and that's the coronavirus. So let's get right into that and then kind of build from there. The first story is that the coronavirus is close to losing its epidemic status in the United States, according to the Center for Disease Control. You heard me right. That's what's going on. The percentage of coronavirus deaths in the country has been declining for 10 straight weeks, right? All you're hearing is cases are going up. U.S. passed 3 million cases, number of people tested positive for coronavirus. Here's a clue for you, folks. 2009 and 10, during the swine flu, 60 million Americans had the swine flu. So 3 million cases ain't jack, and I'll guarantee you it's probably 10 times that if it's even one. It's 30 million or more have this coronavirus, have had it already. We just haven't done enough testing, and the cases are going up because we're doing more testing. But the bottom line is the CDC qualifies a disease outbreak as an epidemic if the number of deaths attributed to the disease exceeds a certain percentage of total deaths per week. The threshold for pneumonia, influenza, and COVID-19 fluctuates slightly depending on the time of year, ranging from around 7% at the height of the flu season to around 5% during less virulent months. The latest data shows that the COVID-19 in the United States is right there at the 5.9% number. 5.9%. So, it's not even an epidemic. So why is it an emergency? And why are we locking down all kinds of things? And this is what's driving me crazy because, as we noted, the cases are what the media is talking about, but they're completely ignoring the death statistics. In June 27th, there were 623 deaths attributed to COVID-19, according to the CDC. 2 days later, the toll in the U.S. was 265. By comparison, 4,928 people died in one day during the peak. So we're now at 265 dying a day when the peak was 4,928. And they're trying to tell you that this is getting worse. It's mind-boggling because it's not getting worse. It's getting better. And these statistics prove that. So what happened in Ohio? For those of you in Ohio listening to the radio show and on the podcast for those around the country, yeah, our governor decides this week that he's going to take 7 counties and basically move to lock them down by telling you have to wear face masks, not just in stores, but outside. You have to wear face masks in these 7 counties. Let's see, the counties that make the criteria are Butler County, Cuyahoga County, Franklin, Hamilton, Huron, Montgomery, and Trumbull. This order will now impact 4.5 million people. 4.5 million people are now being told that you all have to wear masks. And you know what? In those 7 counties, when DeWine made this announcement, there were only 56 people in the hospital in all 7 counties, and they had 2 deaths. Read my lips, 2 deaths. And that's reason to have 4.5 million people locked down? This is just insane. And so don't trust me. This is what the sheriff of Butler County said when this order came down.
How's everybody doing today? I'm the Butler County Sheriff, Rick Jones. I'm here today. Our phone, we're getting calls, we're getting emails, we're getting texts. The governor has, I believe, he's just completed the mandatory mask wearing for Butler County. Several of the counties in the state of Ohio, it's going to be mandatory, the mask wearing. And I'm here we don't have the orders, what he's put out yet, but I can tell you this, that I want to make sure everybody understands I am not the mask police. I am not going to enforce any mask wearing. That is not my responsibility. That is not my job. People should be able to make that choices themselves. I didn't put this order out, and it's getting to the point. People are scared. People are calling and asking, do we have to wear the mask in our house, in our cars? It's getting kind of ridiculous at this point. But I believe, as the sheriff in Butler County here in Ohio, the economy is starting to try to get back to where it was. You can't go to restaurants, and at one time you were looked down on if you tried to go to church, and the churches were closed, and it's totally out of control. It should be left up to the individual if they want to wear a mask. If someone's sick, I can understand the mask wearing, but for all of us to have your temperature taken, to have to wear a mask, where is it going to stop? Don't call 911 because someone is not wearing a mask. I, as the Butler County Sheriff, am not enforcing any mask wearing whatsoever to the public, and my deputies will not enforce it. We've got more important things to do. It's all we can do to keep up with fighting crime, locking people up and making sure they're safe and the employees are safe.
So there you have the reaction from the Butler County Sheriff, and there's been other sheriff's departments and police departments around the state who are saying, I'm not the mask police. This is an order. It's not a law. And, if you want to report someone not wearing a mask, call the health department. So that's the kind of reaction they're getting from a lot of people. And when people called me from around the state when DeWine made this order, I made it clear. It's time, folks, for us to just simply refuse to comply, because what they're telling you is a lie. It's a damned lie. And I'm going to prove it right now, because DeWine his administration is holding key data back from the public. We now know from reports from a reporter from Mansfield, who has been doing a great job on this, that the coronavirus cases that they're telling you. So now they're not talking about deaths, which is all that matters, because they told you at the beginning, we're about saving lives. But now he doesn't want to tell you how many lives are being saved, right? Doesn't even want to tell you how many lives are being saved. And then he's saying that, these cases are going up, but we have evidence that says that they are taking a patient. Let's say you go in to the emergency room and you get tested for COVID and you test positive. Now you're in the hospital because you didn't go to the emergency room for COVID. You went to get a knee replacement. And then you're in the hospital and they test you again and you test positive because you already tested positive once. they're counting that as twice. And then if you get tested a couple days later, they're counting it again. So these statistics that they're saying there's this huge blow up of cases are bogus. And then the whole idea is that we're having a surge, right? The governor is saying we're having a surge of cases, and that's why we've got to take these drastic steps. And he said, you should be afraid, and it will make you wear your mask. I'm telling you, you'll be a fool if you're afraid, because there's nothing to be afraid of. And so the surge isn't coming from a higher percentage of people getting COVID-19. It's because we're testing more people. That's the fact. And then the Columbus Dispatch said that the infection rate is going up to more than 6% during the recent spike. And yet, on the Ohio COVID's own website, it shows that the spike is going down. We're having less cases. And look at this. For you watching the podcast, here's the criteria that DeWine is using for his dashboard now that we're all supposed to follow with these counties. And on the dashboard, it says, these are the things we're looking at. 7 indicators: new cases per capita, sustained increase in new cases, proportion of new cases, sustained emergency room visits, sustained increase in outpatient visits, sustained increase in new COVID-19 hospitalization admissions, intensive care unit bed occupancy. What's missing from that list? This is his dashboard to tell you how dangerous it is in your county. The thing that's missing from that list, deaths. They aren't even going to post the trend of deaths in your county. Do you see how bogus this is? It's insanity. And so get this. I talked about how the CDC is saying that COVID is not even an epidemic anymore. The 21-day trend line in Ohio is 18 deaths per day. Historically, over the last 10 years, the average deaths per day in Ohio from all sources is 325 a day. We are locking down 4.5 million people because we have 18 people dying when 325 people die every day, no matter what we do. 18 people out of 325 is like 5%. It's less than 5%. You should not comply to any of this. And what's really bad is what they're doing to the schools, because they're now these stupid people are trying to close the schools and not open them up in the fall because of this bad information. And so I'm going to play for you once again our friend Dr. Atlas and his statement about schools. Listen once again closely.
But the point about the schools is really critical, because this is the most irrational public policy probably in modern history. Children have virtually zero risk of getting a serious complication, virtually zero risk of dying. We know that. It's from the data all over the world, not just in the US. There's no arguing about that data. We also know all over the world that children only rarely, if ever, transmit the disease. And so there's really no risk, but there's tremendous harm in not having in-person schools. As the American Association of Pediatrics pointed out, as the Hospital for Sick Kids in Toronto, one of the world's best hospitals for pediatric medicine, pointed out when they recommended full opening, no masks, no distancing. There is no science behind having children not attend schools. There is zero science for having children wear masks or have spacing when they have zero risk from the disease. People that are older in the teaching age, okay, well, teaching is a young profession. 50% of U.S. teachers in K through 12 are under 41 years old. They're not high risk, and 82% are under 55. For the few high-risk teachers, I think by now they probably know how to isolate themselves from 6 feet away from others or wear a mask. And if that's not enough, then frankly, those high-risk teachers can stay home and teach from a distance. You don't lock down the children because you are personally afraid. It's totally outrageous.
Yeah, it's totally outrageous, and I agree. And we have schools in Ohio who are now talking about students going to school 1 day per week. Are you serious? And I've told you on previous shows that this, in this latest lockdown with when they closed the schools early and they were supposed to be distance learning, there were statistics showing that 30 to 40% of the students weren't even logging in to get the lessons from the teachers. You're not teaching anybody. And so to not open up, as Dr. Atlas says, everybody, 5 days a week, regular school, there is zero threat here. Oh, but you don't want to tell that to the teachers. Yeah, so in Florida, where they're open up, DeSantis has said next month, you're opening up all your schools, regular school, 5 days a week. The Florida teachers say the state's decision to reopen the schools could be deadly. Okay, Florida has become a new hotspot for the virus with more than 200,000 cases, the fourth highest in the nation. Oh my goodness gracious. What did I teach you last week about perspective? 200,000 cases in Florida. That's total cases. What's the population of Florida? 21 million. That means less than 1% of the people in Florida have tested positive. And that's not people who are sick. They've had 3,890 deaths out of 21 million people. That's 0.00018% of the population. And these teachers are saying reopening schools could be deadly. Yeah, and they're not talking about New York State where they have 32,000 deaths compared to 3,890 in Florida. This is about life and death, they say. It's really ludicrous to say that Governor DeSantis says that all schools must reopen when Miami is the epicenter of Florida for the virus. Carla Hernandez-Matz, president of United Teachers of Dade, told CNN's Brianna Kyler, this is about life and death. She said, while many teachers are in their 30s and 40s, that doesn't mean they wouldn't be taking a risk by stepping into the classroom. They take a risk every day. Every teacher you've ever known has gotten every disease known to man because that's what kids do. It's a germ factory. She says, this morning when I was looking on the social media, teachers were posting, where can I get a living will? Can you stop laughing when you hear me say that? Teachers are saying, where can I get a living will? I'm such a snowflake. I'm going to get this from these students. That's what Dr. Atlas is saying. And I've said all along, if you followed this show at all, we don't have an education system in the United States. We have a jobs program for adults. And the fact of the matter is, the unions don't give a damn about the kids. They only care about making money, taking money from you, the taxpayer, and doing as little in return for it as possible. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And now I'm going to explain to you why it's the truth. Here's the real truth. You want some truth? Listen to this truth. Landon Fuller, an outgoing 11-year-old from Hobbs, New Mexico, loved to make people laugh. He enjoyed sports, running his bike around the neighborhood with his friends, and attending church with his parents and two older sisters. The shuttering of schools and the stay-at-home orders implemented to minimize the risk of spreading COVID-19 were hard on him, his mother said, and he often asked to go out and play or accompany his parents to the grocery store. For Landon, it was the end of the world, said his mother, Katrina Fuller. On April 23rd, almost 6 weeks after his last day in the classroom, Landon took a gun his father carried to protect himself from rattlesnakes while working in the oil fields. He rode his bike to a field a little way from the family's home, and he killed himself. Landon's death was one of more than 2,300 unexpected deaths being analyzed by the Office of Medical Investigators since the first COVID-19 was confirmed in New Mexico in early March. That is nearly a 20% spike in unexpected deaths, which usually includes car crashes, suicides, homicides, and some natural deaths. The rise in deaths goes beyond those who have died from COVID-19. The disease caused by the novel coronavirus, officials have so far reported 513 dead. We've locked down New Mexico, we've locked down other states, 513 people dead, and in the process, we've killed 2,300 people, including this 11-year-old. And that's the truth, folks. That's what you need to understand about the teachers and school. It is critical that we get back to school. And President Trump took action this week, and he held a big seminar, and he says, I'm pushing schools to open. We've got to open our schools. And I agree with the Federalist who wrote a story that says Trump should yank federal funds from every school that refuses to open this fall. And that's the bottom line. But you've got schools that are out there, like I said, some of them are only opening, they're going to say, we're going to open 1 day a week. 1 day a week. In Washington State, the Washington Office of the Superintendent of Schools says that prioritizing black students over whites is getting them back in the classrooms. How can this possibly be legal when they're saying that they're going to cater to people of color to get them back to school, but not white kids? Do you realize how nuts these people are? So if you watch this show, you know that we do not just talk, we act. And often I ask you to take action in defense of your own personal, liberty and freedom and prosperity, and to defend our nation and our Constitution. So here is your ask for this week. Number one, I want you to call your school superintendent and your school board member in your area, because if you're a taxpayer, you're paying property taxes either through your rent or through your property taxes. I want you to say to them, number one, we want you to open up 5 days a week. We don't care what this union says. We pay the bills. We're the taxpayers. And if you have a problem, send them to the WeThePeopleConvention.org website and send them the link to the Dr. Atlas statement, the video that says why schools should open. Number two, ask them to tell you whether that school and that school district is going to be putting any curriculum in that it revolves around the New York Times 1619 Project or Black Lives Matter curriculum on racism. There is an effort underway in this nation to continue to indoctrinate our children into hating the United States of America. It's time that you and I, the taxpayers, put our foot down and say, not with my money. And then if you're watching the podcast, there's this book that's out called White Fragility, a necessary book for all people invested in societal change. Why is it so hard for white people to talk about racism? And my understanding is that unions across this country are buying these books and making teachers read them. And these books are to teach white teachers that they should be ashamed of themselves, be ashamed of being white, be ashamed of America, and they should start indoctrinating children, our children, your grandchildren, to hate America. You need to make sure that your superintendent and your school board member takes action to not have the book White Fragility being passed around the school district that you pay for. Okay? So we're going to take a little break. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski, and we're sure glad that you joined us.
Buckeye Firearms Association is Ohio's #1 gun rights organization, protecting the rights of Ohio's 4 million gun owners. And you can get our weekly gun rights newsletter free. Receive breaking news and urgent alerts on gun laws. Stay up to date on self-defense and shooting sports. Discover pro-gun activities and events near you. Get your free gun rights newsletter now at bfanews.org. That's bfanews.org. bfanews.org.
The Buckeye Institute was founded in 1989, and we're the longest serving free market think tank in the state of Ohio. My goal is removing barriers to prosperity that have been put in place by government. We want for Ohio to be the freest and most prosperous state in the country.
The Buckeye Institute is a source of common sense ideas that will have an impact on the nation as well as the state of Ohio.
All right, we're back from our break, and we're glad you're with us. And as I said, you have an assignment. I mean, first of all, I said at the very beginning, it's time for us in Ohio and all of you around the country to stop complying with these insane orders. They're illegal. There's no force of law behind this. And it's time for you to say, I'm not wearing a stinking mask, regardless of the consequences. We have to do civil disobedience. It's just that simple. So that's number one. Number two, we've got to go to our school districts where we pay the taxes and say, we're not going to pay you to do nothing. The science is clear. We don't care what the governor says, and we sure don't care what the union says. You need to get everybody back in school. You need to be sure that you're not indoctrinating with the 1619 Project and this racial stuff from Black Lives Matter and this white fragility nonsense. And you need to start teaching our kids about America and how great we are. Now, there's a new thing that's come out this week by our friends, the lefty groups, want major cuts in the nation's security and justice system. A coalition known as the Movement for Black Lives has released proposed federal legislation that would radically transform the nation's criminal justice and security systems, right? It's called the Breathe Act. Aw, isn't that cute, right? The lefties always manipulating language. The Breathe Act, because I can't breathe is the whole thing behind the riots, right? So here's what they want. And basically, it's a communist manifesto. Section 1 says they want to divest federal resources from incarceration and policing and ending criminal legal system harms. So they want to defund the police. And I told you before, why do they want to defund the police? Because they want to put in their own police. They want to put in their own brown shirts. They want to take over your city, just like Hitler did with the Nazis. They took over the police forces, and then Hitler was in control. Section 2, investing in new approaches to community safety, utilizing funding incentives. So we want to take more of the tax dollars from all these people in this community and give them to our friends who are going to create these social safety groups, which are going to be another indoctrination center. Section 3, allocating new money to build healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities for all people. When you hear the word sustainability, you know you're talking to a commie, okay? This is about, not having equal opportunity, but having equal outcomes. And when you have equal outcomes, what that means is you're all dead poor, except for the people who rule over you. And that's what Black Lives Matter and all these black groups and these other communists, because again, that's not me accusing them. Their leader said live on TV, we are trained Marxists. They're communists, right? And you're going to hear that again in the next clip. Finally, in Section 4, they're saying holding officials accountable and enhancing self-determination of black communities. I got to laugh at that out loud. If anyone has heard James Woodson on Fox talking about Black Lives Matter and what's wrong with the whole situation in Black America, he will say to you that the whole civil rights movement was about the ability to elect black people to run black communities so there wouldn't be any racism. And now these morons are saying we want to hold officials accountable and enhance self-determination of black communities. You got all the self-determination you want. It's called a frickin' election. You elected these people who've enslaved you. You've empowered the slave master on the government plantation. And you're going to follow these morons and support this legislation? How stupid are you? Apparently really stupid. And so speaking of stupid, we're seeing our sports teams and corporations fall over backwards, with their fake, social consciousness, right? And they're going to support all these black groups because they don't know what else to do. Well, here's Jason Whitlock, a sports guy, to tell it to you straight. Listen what he has to say.
Sports. What do you think this is about, and is it a good idea, do you think?
I think it's really about a lack of leadership and just a failure of men to stand up and stand on the principles that they say they believe in. And so when I look at what the NFL is doing, this goes against every value that the NFL has built itself on. Professional sports have built themselves on a celebration of Americana and the ideals and values that best exemplify America. They built themselves on unity and unifying the country. If the NFL starts out its season with everyone standing for Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Black National Anthem, and then virtually everyone on the field taking a knee when the Star Spangled Banner plays, I think it's going to be, if you remember the show Happy Days, the jump the shark moment when it's like, okay, Happy Days is over. The NFL will run off a nice fat chunk of its audience and will never be seen the same again because of the failure of leadership throughout the NFL. There's no way you can do any homework on Black Lives Matters and not see that it's a Marxist political organization. It's not about black death. It's not about black men. It is a political move. It's a communist political move. if for those people that stand on religious values, and this is where I say just the failure of men. I've seen many of these guys, they claim their Christianity and their religious beliefs. Do they understand Black Lives Matter, communist, Marxism is anti-religious? This is a historic failure of men and leadership. This is cowardice at its highest level. This is the NFL jumping the shark and saying we've quit being who we said we are. We're now something else because our money's on the line and we don't stand for the values we said we stood for. This is NFL ownership. All of them. Cowards. Not standing up for what they believe in. America has made them filthy rich and some of the most powerful people on the planet, and they're unwilling to defend the values they built their business on and the country that has enriched them incredibly.
Yeah, right? Cowards. That's what they are. And you know, this guy just said it perfectly. These owners who are filthy rich because of our type of economy, free market economy, now will not defend it. They cave to this stupidity. Like he said, you can't, only a fool can't read the Black Lives Matter website and know who they are. And you're going to, as the NFL, you're going to give up everything you ever said you were, your place in American society? For what? A bunch of communists? I got news for you. I'm not watching NFL football this year. And so are a lot of other people aren't going to watch it either. Because I'm not going to have myself insulted. I'm not going to have my country insulted. You can go to hell and you can go out of business. And we're going to help make you go out of business. If you're that stupid, you deserve to go out of business. But this is why the tensions are so high. A Rasmussen poll this week showed that 50% of the people in the United States think that there will be a bid to overthrow the U.S. government, at least somewhat likely within the next decade. 18% said very likely, 32% said very likely, or excuse me, somewhat likely. So 18 said very likely, 32% said somewhat likely. That's pretty scary. That's pretty sad. We really don't want that in our country, but you can tell why. And it's because of the rioting and the looting and the threats to people and the murders and the assaults and all that. So what are we seeing? How about gun sales are off the chart? As pockets of anti-law enforcement activities demand that jurisdictions strip funding from police departments, ordinary citizens around the country assert that they are resorting to self-defense and buying weapons. The assertion comes amid a nationwide spike in personal weapons sales. In June, the FBI checked the backgrounds of, get this, 3,931,607 potential gun buyers, according to the FBI. In the same month, Americans bought 2,387,524 new guns, right? And now, news for you, those weren't just conservatives. They're not just us. A lot of lefties, after they saw the lefty in St. Louis have to defend his house from the mob, realized new gunners say they bought firearms because police might not reach them in time. Welcome to the new reality, right? But notice that you haven't seen a whole lot of those protests lately. Well, isn't that interesting? Yeah, what did we talk about last week about the DOJ and AG Barr cracking down on these people? Well, guess what? This week, the DOJ announces fresh round of indictments for rioters. U.S. Attorney Billy J. Williams announced today that 7 people have been arrested and face federal charges for their roles in weekend riots at the Marco Hatfield U.S. Courthouse in Portland, Oregon. According to the court documents, since May 26, protests in downtown Portland have regularly been followed by nightly criminal activity, including assaults on law enforcement officers, destruction of property, looting, arson, and vandalism. And so they've arrested, and I got the names of the people here, they've arrested these people, and they're going to go to prison, as President Trump said they would. Okay? So we have to fight back, and I gave you some things to do with the schools. I've got another ask for you, because last week I said it's time for us to start getting ready for the election. And I said that we would be talking the NRA and rolling out what we're going to do. So today, I've got 2 things for you to put on your list, okay? Now, the first thing was do not comply. We talked about that. We got to defend our freedom. But here's the thing I need you to do. I need you to sign up to work the polls at your local Board of Elections. Now, I know many of you have never done this. You actually get paid for it. You get paid like $130 for election day, and you get paid $35, I think, for training. But you're not doing it for the money. If we're going to have mail-in ballots, which we have in Ohio are called absentee ballots, we're not doing mail-in like they do in California, where they mail everyone a ballot and then they can be fraudulently sent in. We don't do that in Ohio. They may do that in your state. But if there's going to be mail-in ballots, and because we do absentees, there's going to be, and because of this disease, there's probably going to be more than ever. We want to be the ones counting the ballots, okay? We want to be the ones who are in the Board of Elections working there. So if you go online, you can look up your county Board of Elections. If you don't know where that is, you can go to the Secretary of State's website at sos.state.ohio.us. Okay, and there you'll find a thing that says election, information. So it's basically where the elections are, and you'll see a list of all 88 boards of elections in the state of Ohio. Okay, now listen to what Frank LaRose, the Secretary of State, said in a statement this week. For county boards of elections to be able to open the appropriate number of polling locations on election day, they must first recruit and train enough poll workers to satisfy the minimum required by state law to operate a precinct. Traditionally, Ohio utilizes over 35,000 poll workers on election day. Because of the current pandemic, fewer poll workers are expected to sign up or show up on election day. In light of the anticipated shortages, unprecedented efforts must be made to recruit new poll workers and backups. Folks, this is your patriotic duty, not just the vote, to help ensure that we have a fair vote, right? And so we have to fill these positions. And I've said this before, and those of you who don't understand, in most states, they have these polling situations where they don't do shifts. So in Ohio, the workers go to work on election day at like 6 a.m. and are there till 8 o'clock at night. So it's a 14-hour day with nobody taking a shift. It's insane, and I fought to change that. But here's the kicker. In Ohio, the average poll worker is 72 years old. I call that elderly abuse. I actually call on them to change it based on the laws, that you can't abuse elderly workers. So we're fighting that fight, but until that's changed, I need you to sign up at your Board of Elections to work in the polls this year, and I need you to recruit some younger people to help us, okay? That's your next task. That's what I need you to work at. And if you need some help and you're on Facebook, our good friend Ralph Spampanato has set up a Facebook page that's called Poll Worker Info and Recruitment. And it says poll workers needed, and they've got people from every county that are signing up on there who will answer your questions and help get you signed up. Okay? So we'll do what we can to make that easier for you. It's not hard. If you go online to your local Board of Elections, you just fill out a form that says, I want to be a poll worker. They'll call you right away. Let me tell you, they're looking for you, and they'll help you get set up, and you'll be ready to go. Okay? So we're going to wrap up the radio show right now. But we're going to keep the podcast going. If you're on the radio, you know the drill. You need to go to wethepeopleconvention.org, and you can then pick up the podcast after the radio show, because we'll be going for another 30 minutes. But I sure appreciate you listening on the radio network, and we'll be back again next week. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski, and I'm awful glad you came to listen today, and I hope you will tell others about our show, because we'll be back again next week. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org, or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. All right, and we are back with our podcast. And everybody who is watching the podcast, thanks for staying with us, and thanks you for promoting the podcast. We had the most In the last 2 weeks, we've had the most viewers of the podcast we've ever had, both on YouTube and on our website. And that's because of you. And I really appreciate it, because the reason you donate to help us have this show is so we can inform the public and counter the misinformation and the lies that are coming out of not just the media, but apparently out of our government now, right? So thank you for doing that. It's really, really important, because it's no use me doing this show if nobody's going to watch the doggone thing, right? So thank you for promoting the show. It's really important. Now, this week, during this week, President Trump gave his big speech on July 3rd at Mount Rushmore. And if you haven't watched it, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org. You'll see our video section. You just click on that. It's there. And you gotta see the South Dakota governor. She did a great job. Governor Noem. She was a very excellent speaker, and I think she's got a real potential future in national elections. She reminds me of Sarah Palin a lot, but is even better. But Trump gave this amazing speech about America, and if you didn't hear it, watch it, you got to watch it, because he really talked about who we are as a nation. He talked about American history. But we know what happened? And you guys now know, all the gloves are off. There is no shading of things. There's no just bias against Donald Trump. The media is literally a propaganda machine. They have no interest in the truth whatsoever. So they literally came out and lied about the Trump speech. They call it divisive. It's the most kumbaya speech you'll ever hear, okay? It was so bad that if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the Watch President Trump's Speech article, I've put an article in there by Byron York, because he said, here's what he said. News coverage is biased against President Trump goes without saying, but every now and then there comes an episode of bias so egregious that it deserves attention. The coverage of President's July 3rd speech at Mount Rushmore is one of those episodes. And he proceeds in where that video is on our website. He goes through the speech and clarifies all the lies that the Washington Post and the New York Times said about it. And so you got to make sure that people see that speech. So go to wethepeopleconvention.org, click on that page, copy the URL, and then even if you go on it, there's share buttons for Facebook, for Twitter, and for emails. Click on the email one, and it'll create an email that you can send to your friends, your neighbors, your parents, your sisters and brothers, somebody. But let them hear this speech. It was a great American speech. And you just need to hear it, because it'll make you feel better about our country and about Donald Trump. So the next thing that happened, because Trump is under attack, but he had a pretty good week, and we're going to call this section our court section, because the Supreme Court handed Trump a big win on Thursday, when basically they denied Congress the ability to get after his tax records. And this is something they've been trying to do. As you know, there's a grand jury in New York State that's looking into Trump's, financial dealings. It was just another total hit job in New York, okay? So they've been trying to do this for literally the whole time Trump's been the president. And so there's two cases. One is the local case in New York, and then there was the Democratic House trying to get access to Trump's tax returns to embarrass him and destroy him before this election. And the Supreme Court ruled on Thursday that they can't get those. So Trump's that whole issue of where's your tax return is off the table before this election. So that's a big deal. The Supreme Court ruled on the Electoral College. And what they did is, these states that after Trump won, again, the left can't accept, right? They were the ones who are asking Donald Trump, will you accept the outcome of the election? And made fun of him about if he wouldn't accept it. So what happens after Trump wins? Hillary Clinton won't accept it. The Democrats won't accept it. And they actually, if you remember, go back to 2016, they tried to get people who were in states electors for the Electoral College to change their vote from the vote in their state and vote for Hillary instead of Trump to try to steal the election. And then when that didn't work, they actually started to pass legislation in their state saying that the electors have to vote according to the national popular vote, which basically is what, folks? That's changing us from a republic to a democracy. That's the French Revolution in replacing our American Revolution. And the Supreme Court said no. They said that the state's electors must back their state's popular vote winner, defeating attempts by the left to tie electors to the national popular vote. So that was a big deal, and that was a good thing. Another win in the courts. Supreme Court hands a double-barreled win to religious liberty on schools and the Obamacare mandate. The Supreme Court ruled that religious employers can opt out of the Obamacare birth control mandate, and religious organizations are exempt from civil court employment discrimination suits. So this goes back to the Little Sisters of the Poor who were being forced to pay for birth control when they're celibate and they're Catholic, okay? And it was a violation of their religious freedom. And finally, after all these years, when Obama tried to do that to them, I don't know, what's it been, like 6 years? The Supreme Court finally ruled that they can't be forced to pay for something that is against their religion, like Obamacare mandates. They also ruled that that they do not have to hire, that they have an exemption from discrimination rules when it comes to be hiring. Because you know what happened? As soon as the Supreme Court illegally claimed that gay marriage was legal in the United States, and again, read that. I mean, again, I'm just telling you, there was no law there whatsoever. That was garbage. But the bottom line was, what they did is the left immediately started to try to have gay people try to get jobs as teachers and even pastors at churches, and claiming that you didn't hire them, you were discriminating them. And the Supreme Court ruled that they have an exemption, that Catholic schools have a ministerial exemption against that kind of a discrimination charge. So this is two big wins for religious freedom, and it was a pretty good week in that regard for the Supreme Court. The last thing the Supreme Court did this week was also important. They greenlighted a whole bunch of pipeline projects, but they did not do the Keystone pipeline, the XL pipeline that's coming from Canada all the way to the United States. They stayed a lower court ruling and allowed a slew of pipeline projects to move forward under a fast-track permitting process, but left out the controversial, long-delayed expansion of the Keystone XL oil sands pipeline. The ruling, which could allow more than 70 pipelines projects to move forward, was a partial victory for Trump, which was vigorously promoting the domestic energy industry his whole presidency. However, the exclusion of Keystone from the order is a high-profile setback for President Trump, who promised during the 2016 campaign to move the Keystone project forward. Well, what's he supposed to do? We're not going to say, oh, you didn't keep your promise. He did everything he could to move the XL pipeline forward. But again, this is just judicial obstruction. This is where the left has kept President Trump from being president for the last 3 years. And that's why all these people need to go to prison who basically ran this coup attempt and have been undermining the president of the United States. And we're hoping we're going to see some action on that down the road. Okay, so we're going to take another short break. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast. And I'm Tom Zawistowski.
This is Jordan Sekula with the American Center for Law and Justice. At the ACLJ, we are committed to fighting the deep state and protecting freedom, the right to life, religious liberty, and fighting for the Constitution. The ACLJ has experienced tremendous success in litigating cases at all levels of the judiciary, from the federal district court level to the Supreme Court of the United States. We have offices in Washington, D.C., Jerusalem, and all around the world. You can find out more about the ACLJ and join us by visiting aclj.org.
Did you know that the Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio is the largest statewide life group in the state? Are you tired of the compromised approach to pro-life legislation that has been the status quo for far too long? Since 2017, the efforts of the Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio has changed that approach, closing loopholes and making pro-life laws enforceable. Visit rtlaohio.org or call 440-668-4049 for details. The Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio, the proven place to go for lasting pro-life.
All right, so we're going to wrap up the show with some serious topics, some bad news and some good news. But we gotta understand what's really going on here. And so there's a lot of indications that the retail sector is going to be a real problem because, as you're seeing, there's all these stores closed. They were already getting hurt by online, stuff, Amazon and Walmart and those people. And then the pandemic came along and it's looking bad. Now, how bad it's going to be, I'm not sure. The one discussion bulls chose to ignore while equity markets soar to new heights is the permanent economic damage story due to months of coronavirus lockdowns. A new report shows tens of thousands of brick and mortar shops could close their doors this year, which would indicate the retail apocalypse is accelerating. The report, commissioned by Coresight Research, forecasts that in 2020, upwards of 25,000 retailers could shutter operations after months of lockdowns decimated mall traffic, collapsing store sales, and resulting in delinquent rent payments. And folks, this is a list of the stores that are closing, so far. And you got to take it to heart. So far, it looks like 8,708 stores have closed or will shutter their operations this year. But there could be a lot more. Chuck E. Cheese is closing 54 stores. Destination Maternity, 90 stores. The GNC, healthcare stores, 1,200 of them, they filed for bankruptcy. J.C. Crew, 54 stores, they filed for bankruptcy. J.C. Penney, 154 stores, they filed for bankruptcy. Kmart, 45 stores. Modell Sporting Goods, 153 stores. Neiman Marcus, 20. Pier 1 Imports, 936 stores, they filed for bankruptcy. Sears, 51 stores. Bed Bath & Beyond, 44 stores. Bath & Body Works, 50 stores. Chico, the dress store, 100 stores. Christopher Banks, 30 to 40 stores. CVS Pharmacy, 22. Hallmark, 16 stores. Macy's, 125. Microsoft Computer, 77 stores. Nordstrom, 16. Office Depot, 90. So you can see, it's a pretty big list. So this is something to be concerned about. And we're going to have to, find out, because the key is, to you watching and listening to this show, you're saying, well, if I can buy it online, what do I care whether Nordstrom closes? But the question is the jobs. The question is, where are the people going to go to work who used to work at all those stores? You close 25,000 stores, they're talking like 3 million people out of work. See how it all works together? So that's a big concern. And I want you to be, paying attention to that. And look out for your friends and relatives that work in those kind of establishments, because they may need some help getting a job, and you need to do something to help them, okay? Next big thing you got to worry about is China. We always talk about this. They are the enemy. They are at war with us. We just haven't decided that we're at war with them. The U.S. sends carriers to South China Sea during Chinese drills. 2 U.S. aircraft carriers were conducting exercises in the disputed South China Sea on July 4th, the U.S. Navy said, as China also carried out military drills that have been criticized by the Pentagon and neighboring states. China and the United States have accused each other of stoking tensions in the strategic waterway at a time of strained relations over everything from COVID-19 pandemic to trade with Hong Kong. The USS Nimitz and U.S. Ronald Reagan were carrying out operations and exercises in the South China Sea to support a free and open Indo-Pacific, the Navy said in a statement. The purpose is to show an unambiguous signal to our partners and allies that we are committed to regional security and stability, Rear Admiral George Wickoff was cited as saying by the Wall Street Journal. There's $3 trillion of trade that goes in the South China Sea, and that is international waters, but China is trying to claim it as domestic waters. And this affects Vietnam and Thailand, Australia, all kinds of people. It is critical that the U.S. act to help keep those waterways open, and we are acting, and that's a credit to President Trump. But while all this other stuff is going on, the Chinese are pushing us. They're trying to gain an edge, and we've got to fight back, and that's why we got to support our military. Now we're going to move on to some better stories, right? Remember that snake Vindman who listened in on Trump's Ukraine call and then coordinated with Adam Schiff to try to impeach President Trump over a phone call that nothing was done wrong? Remember that clown? Who said that he was asked to be the Secretary of Defense for Ukraine? Well, guess what? He quit. He's retiring from the Army. And the poor guy said, Vindman told that Vindman is retiring because he feels his future military career will forever be limited by a campaign of bullying, intimidation, and retaliation by Trump. Good. Get the hell out. And his brother's gone too. This guy's a traitor. He didn't do the right thing. He didn't do the right thing at all. And that's why Adam Schiff won't give up the documents for what happened during this impeachment stuff. But we're going to find out those documents. And I hope someday this guy's indicted. But we're awful glad to see him go. Here's something else we're awful glad to see. This is good news. You didn't hear this anywhere. Americans defund Democrats in state house elections as Democrats seek to defund police. Americans significantly decreased contributions to Democrats running for state legislature seats in second quarter as the Democratic Party has turned hard left. Fundraising information announced this week shows the lackluster performance by Democrats at the state level could have broader national implications. First off, state-level political trends sometimes forecast later looming national trends from the State House to the White House, as the saying goes. But more importantly, the state legislatures elected this year will handle redistricting next year heading into the 2020 cycle, influence the direction of and perhaps control of the U.S. House of Representatives for the next decade. The drop-off in Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee fundraising, which has Democrats $20 million shy of their stated cycle-long goal of $50 million total, comes as their Republican counterparts nearly doubled the total raised by Democrats in the second quarter. See? So their policies are hurting them. No one's buying what Black Lives is selling. And the Democratic Party is making a huge fundamental mistake by doing it. They're on the losing side, folks. No one in America wants what they're selling. We don't want a Green New Deal. We don't want open borders. You don't hear anybody talking about gun control anymore, do you? I just said how many people bought guns and how many of them were Democrats. You don't hear anybody talking about open borders anymore when you got COVID-19 bringing disease in, right? That's a losing platform, and they're still pushing the same nonsense. Literally, Joe Biden announced this week what his platform was, including defunding the police. They actually copied sections of Bernie Sanders' statements of what he would do if he was president and pasted them into Joe Biden's document word for word. That's how dumb Joe Biden is. We're going to crush these morons. As I said before, no Democrat has a prayer of defeating Donald Trump. The only way they can win is if they cheat and steal it. And that's why they're trying to censor us. And that's why you've got to work the polls, because we got to stop them. Okay? So get this last story. You'll love this. Trump has a 91% chance of winning re-election, political science professor says. President Donald Trump is almost certain to win re-election in 2020, according to a political science professor whose primary model has correctly predicted 5 out of 6 elections since 1996. The primary model gives Trump 91% chance of winning in November, Stony Brook professor Helmut Norpoth told Mediate Tuesday. He noted that his model, which he introduced in 1996, would have correctly predicted the outcome of all but 2 presidential elections in the last 108 years. This model gets it right for 25 of the 27 elections since 1912, when primaries were introduced. The exceptions include John F. Kennedy's election in 1960 and George W. Bush's election in 2000, when Bush won a majority of the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote. Not only will Trump win, Northwest model suggests, the president will expand his margin in the Electoral College from 304 electoral votes in 2016 to 362 in 2020. That would be nearly identical to the 365 electoral votes former President Barack Obama won in 2008. Surveys have largely suggested Trump is falling further behind Biden as the coronavirus pandemic wears on, with several polls conducted in June showing Biden with an 8 to 12 point lead nationally. Northrop said his model predicted Trump's election in 2016 partially by discounting opinion surveys. Polls and poll-based forecasts all handed Hillary Clinton a certain victory, he said, and my system did not. So we don't know what's going to happen, but it is interesting that it's not what they tell you it is it? It's never quite what they tell you it is. So that's why you come here to listen to the We the People convention. a podcast and radio show. I can't thank those of you who have been donating enough. It's been overwhelming, and it's going to allow us to really accelerate our strategy, which I've laid out to you. We're going to be doing more texting. We're buying radio spots on this Ohio News Network. We're trying different ways to reach people, and it's working. For the first time in 2 months, remember I said on May 15th, that the Google and Facebook put the hammer on us, and we went from 13,000 people to our website every day to 435. And we were just getting killed, and they were blocking our emails. Unbelievable. But since we've moved to our texting model, the story I put out on Sunday about the coronavirus no longer being an epidemic, we had 5,000 people come to our website for that story. And then on Thursday, when I put out the story that said that Ohio was counting people twice and wasn't telling the people the truth about the surge of coronavirus in Ohio, we're at 7,000 views of that page. That's because of your donations. And I just can't thank you enough, because now we're reaching people again. We're back out there reaching people. You did that. And I thank you for doing that, because again, that's the whole game here. We have to figure out how to get out our vote, how to fight the propaganda and educate people. And that's why you got to tell people about this podcast. I know that you do, right? I mean, we always say you got to tell other people about it. And I told you that we had the 2 most watched shows the last 2 weeks. So that's working. I also tell you to send in your comments to info@wethepeopleconvention.org, because a bunch of the stories on the show today came from you. This is your show. I just produce it and perform it, right? Yeah, I do a lot of work to get the show ready, but I listen to you. I listen to what you're interested in. I try to give you the information you're not getting anywhere else. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. So, I want to thank you for all your support. I want you to come back again next week. I want you to bring a lot of people with you, because, this is what it's about. We're running out of time, and I'm going to have each week now things that we're going to start doing with the NRA and other things that we're going to do outside the NRA to help make sure that Donald Trump gets elected. And I got to tell you, I've been working on this all week. It's going to be the most insanely different election campaign you've ever seen. I'm going to be asking you to do things you aren't going to believe, but you're going to understand why I ask you, and they're going to work. Okay? So thanks again for listening this week. We'll be back again next week. This is the We the People Convention News and Opinion Radio Show and Podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski.